Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. I'm very honored, actually, to be here today with you in this Smart City and Sports Summit, especially around the thematic of youth, to discuss about youth empowerment. I'm going to share a little bit our experience as Terre des Hommes from an NGO perspective using sports for empowering youth. So Terre des Hommes is a leading Swiss organization for children's aid. Our mission is to promote and defend children's rights over the world in humanitarian and development context, and to ensure that vulnerable children access their rights and improve their condition worldwide. So we are, as an organization, contributing to 11 of the SDGs. I'm not going to cite them all here now. But maybe more specifically around our child protection programming, we've got these 5 key SDGs that we are trying to contribute to. The SDG 16 is particularly important because we've got the target 16.2 referring to ending all forms of of violence against children, and the target 16.7, I mean, especially probably relevant for us today, when we speak about youth empowerment, which refers to ensuring responsive, inclusive, participatory and representative decision making at all levels. So when we speak about child protection and sports for Terre des Hommes, we actually articulate that in 3 different ways, and Philippe have just mentioned it in the introduction. So we speak about child protection through sport. I mean, TDH believes that sport has the power to positively influence children's life and has the power to be a uniting force for good in society in ways actually little else can, especially for children and youth. So to achieve this, we have partnerships with sport organizations to be able to together to raise the bar of child protection in sport. We also look at child protection in sport, where we actually look at supporting safeguarding children in sport. I mean, we all know that despite the well-recognized benefit from sport, there are also high risks related to sports practice, which have actually long-lasting impacts for children and young athletes. Harm caused by harassment and abuse and still represent actually today a blind spot for many sport organizations. So for this purpose, we are also partnering with sport organizations willing to change this and actually to ensure that sport is safe. And lastly, articulation of child protection around sport, around protecting children around mega sporting events. That means it's around making sure that stakeholders, and especially sport governing bodies, have the responsibility to respect human and child rights and manage properly the risk of harming children in the course of their activity. And that's about also enabling youth to contribute to the mega sporting events, but also to have their voice heard. So now, how do we exactly make sure that sports bring child protection and empowerment? So what you can see here is a theory of change that TDH created together with the International Olympic Committee and the UNHCR when we developed in 2018 a Sport for Protection toolkit, which is actually a guidance to support Sport Plus and Plus Sport organization to be able to use sport for protection. This toolkit was particularly done for targeting children in displacement settings. So the idea behind this theory of change is that we believe that if we conduct sport activities in a safe and supportive environment, where young people are able to learn while practicing together, and if we give them leadership roles within continuous support of their peers and trusted adults, then young people can feel safe, appreciated, respected, and hopeful for a positive future. And this increased well-being will then help them to bring change in their lives and in their communities. So as I said earlier, one of the prerequisites for all that to happen is actually to make sure that sport is safe. And I just illustrated here one of the partnerships we have with UEFA, where we try to support them in building their capacities and policies in order to make sure that children are safe. So you've got here a link also to a web platform where we have publicized some of the e-learning material also that was developed that I believe can be also very useful for other organizations. So let's now have a few examples of the type of project we're having on the field. So in Egypt, we work in Cairo. Cairo hosts today around 260,000 registered refugees and asylum seekers, primarily from Syria, Sudan, Ethiopia, Yemen. And actually, children and young people report being faced with high risk of discrimination, exploitation, and insecurity, among other protection issues. So we've developed a project to support youth, both from the refugee and the host communities, to promote social inclusion and combat discrimination and xenophobia using sport. In India, we work in West Bengal. West Bengal is one of the states where you have the highest cases of child marriage overall in India, and it's also accounted for 25% of the trafficking cases still in India. And our objective here is to empower girls at risk or affected by unsafe migration, forced marriage, trafficking, trafficking, to be actually protected and to be able to promote gender equality. And this is done through kabaddi, which is a traditional sport in India. And finally, another example in Greece. We all know about the refugee crisis that Greece is facing. We work in Thessaloniki, where we know that a lot of refugee youth often end up homeless, resorting to negative coping strategies, and in most cases are at risk of being involved in illegal activities. So we use sport and football specifically to empower refugee youth, to strengthen their psychosocial well-being, to support their own protection, but the protection of their peers also. So more concretely, the type of activities we are trying to put in place within this project. I mean, this is quite probably systematic, but I will speak about it because it's important, is the situation analysis, which is very important to actually understand the whole power relations, stakeholders around the child protection issues we want to address. And when we speak about building a sports project, it's also looking at the sport landscape. It's to ensure that we know what already exists and we build on what exists, whether it's informal or formal at the level of sport activities, for example. And building partnership is also one of the things. I will come back on it later because it's really crucial in order to ensure ownership and sustainability from the really beginning of the activities. We also, of course, use a youth-led approach. I mean, and this is really all through the project cycle, from the assessment to the design, to the implementation and the monitoring of the project. We have developed specific methodologies where we use sport to strengthen life skills, to challenge harmful norms, and give opportunities for children and youth to take the lead in transforming positively their lives and their communities. But they, of course, always need to be adapted and contextualized as per the type of child protection issues we want to work on and the context in itself. So here we see two of the examples, one being the kabaddi to empower girls in India, and the other one, the football for protection we developed for Greece. And of course, we build capacity then based on this methodology, and this is for informal actors like youth or coaches within the civil society, but also at government level, for example, within the education system or within federations. So awareness raising and local advocacy is one of the key aspects, actually, because we all know how challenges it can be, and I will come back on that also, about convincing everyone that actually sport has that much power. And so we do this awareness raising and this local advocacy a lot through sport events. The idea is to try to influence the views of civil society and government actors, influence their views on specific child protection issues, but also on the place given to sport and its access to all within a city or within the education system. And it's also influencing the views and on creating spaces and opportunities for youth to be heard and to take the lead. So some of the outcomes we have reached recently with this project. So I've just tried to capture here, I mean, there's a lot, but try to capture some of the quotes we collected during some monitoring and evaluation within this project. And we can see that youth report feeling empowered in managing their challenge, strengthening their internal and external support mechanisms, such as managing emotion, overcoming fear, anxiety, strengthening their self-esteem, their self-confidence, peer support, and ultimately this actually really influence and increase their sense of self and collective efficacy. So before going to the outcomes we have in terms of partnership, I wanted again to insist on that, because I think that for me this is the big power also of this kind of summit. And I just want to highlight again how important it is to really involve from the really beginning and have partnership with different actors and with government authorities at the city and national level to make sure that the programs we embark in are sustainable. And when we speak about partnership, it's not only about formal actors, but it's also making sure that we have all the non-formal actors, and this can be, of course, youth, communities, but it can be also sometimes faith-based organization or other community-based organization that really need to be involved. Because ultimately, at the end, I mean, formal and non-formal actors create this kind of safety net that will help youth to feel empowered. I mean, of course, what we need is also to be able to develop this common vision and to rely on this complementary strength, even though we know that sometimes it can be challenging, but this is something that is key. I just also captured here a few extracts from the Sport Protection Toolkit that actually is very also, I mean, emphasizing also this importance of building partnership, giving guidance on how to select partners, and also being able to give some highlights of checklist of how to ensure sustainability, which is the key. So in terms of partnership, I took some examples of the Kabaddi for Empowerment project we have in India, where actually we partner with different levels of actors, the Amateur Kabaddi Federation of India, and actually it's a nice, I mean, the way we managed to partner with them, it's quite interesting, because we actually realized that our needs intersected, because they were looking to reach out to female athletes for their team, and they had this trouble of trying to reach out these athletes. And on the other hand, we had the girls that were really eager to play Kabaddi, but we didn't have technical, coaching available. So this is when we realized this mutual interest that we really strengthen our partnership. And they have been really instrumental in supporting us to set up the annual Kabaddi League for girls, send the coaches to train the girls, but also they managed to train additional coaches from their own to extend the program. So this was a great success. We also work, of course, with all the municipal authorities, and some of them had a lot of doubt at the beginning, but then finally, one of the success is that because they recognized the empowerment that these girls had thanks to this project, they even enrolled them in child protection committees at municipal level, because they thought that they had, the capacity to voice out and to relay the concern of other girls. And of course, we also work with local authorities. What is interesting here is that, again, there was a lot of suspicion and question, and it's because we managed to involve them from the start when we start doing the selection for which girl would go to the Kabaddi team, that they start being interested. So it was actually the sport that brought them on board, and not the child protection issues at first. But then, of course, for us, it was a great opportunity to have them really understanding and taking all the value of sport in tackling such issues. And we also work with very more specific services like the Directorate of Child Rights and Trafficking, which also had a lot of doubts about the capacity of sport making any change. And finally, we received the request to actually extend the program to other states. So this was a big success. So let me finish maybe just by capturing a few challenges. I think I've already mentioned a few, and challenges and recommendation. So one of the challenges, of course, when we speak about cities and sport and vulnerable population is the access to sport field in urban environment. And we know that often the control to access to this part is done by the local bodies, and that it's very often challenging to convince them to open this, public spaces for vulnerable children. So this is one of the challenges we have. Another one, of course, is the sustainability. Sustainability in some specific contexts. We work in context of protracted conflict, where fragile states have very weak structure or no structure really functioning. And here, of course, the only way out, in a way, is really to rely on the civil society. But we can all understand that given the context they find themselves in, it's quite challenging at times. Another challenge is, of course, sometimes when approaching child protection services, not considering sports as really a serious way to tackle some of the issues. So this is, of course, one of the challenges. Another important aspect is changes within institutions. When you want to embark in changes within institutions, for example, working on the change of consideration of sport within education system, or changing norm with sport within a civil society, it takes time. And that means you need to plan from the beginning on long-term investments and funding. And this is often challenging. And of course, as I said earlier, in terms of challenging partnership, I mean, NGO and the federation and the sports organization have somehow a different culture. I mean, of course, the consideration for federation will be to look at sport performance, which is a reality and a need. And from the NGO perspective, we might be looking more at the social and psychological impact of sport. And sometimes, of course, we've got different realities and objectives. But at the end of the day, I still believe that because we have one of the same, I think one of the beliefs that bridges is really the belief that sport can bring positive outcome for child development. And I really think that this is a way out, actually, to carry out successful partnership. So some of the lessons learned, I've already started mentioning a few. I mean, at the NGO level, first of all, it's important to ensure the involvement and the buy-in of all the local authorities. I think I've said that several times from the early stages. But because it doesn't always work, and because there are a lot of questions about this capacity to use sports for child protection and empowerment, we need to develop strategies to embark all actors. And I think I mentioned that in terms of trying to pilot and then get the actors on board, and organizing sport events as a great way to showcase the impact of sport for protection. It's also, as I said, about investing in measuring outcomes at the different level. This is very important to also advocate for the strong impact that it can have. And onshore long-term programming, I've said that already. And my last recommendation that actually is addressing everyone here is really, I think, what we said, I mean, what I've tried to convey is the importance of synergies, coordination, complementarities, and making sure that we have the same kind of spaces we have today at local level to engage with these discussions. And finally, maybe my last point is when we speak about empowering youth with sport, I think we don't need to stop only to the idea that we're going to build their capacities with sport and that we strengthen their resilience so they can voice out. We also need to make sure that they have opportunities then to be heard and opportunities to take the lead. And these are also a responsibility of us all to make that happen.
Thank you so much, Maria. That's a great segue to the next part of the presentations.